Hey folks, this is Rhykker, and let's roll a die to find out what gamers are upset about this week. Alright, looks like an 18, so let's consult our gamer rage table here. Anthem, Epic Games Store, Fallout 76. All of the above. In this week's gaming news wrap-up video, we'll tackle all the topics that have people upset this week, including how Borderlands 3 became embroiled in all this. We'll give a roundup of action RPG news and more. As always, discussion timestamps can be found in the video description, but right before we jump ahead, just a quick reminder to ring that sub-notification bell to be alerted of new Saturday episodes. Now, before we dive into the bad news of the week, let's start with something awesome. Wizards of the Coast released a trailer for their upcoming 81st expansion to Magic the Gathering, War of the Spark. Now, even if, like me, you are not a fan of Magic the Gathering, and even if, like me, you don't even know all that much about Magic the Gathering, this trailer is still a spectacle, and it hit me right in the feels. No, my feels is a bit lower. It's built around a cover to Linkin Park's In the End, which... soft spot for me. Rest in peace, Chester. But I've said enough, just go ahead, check it out yourself. It's real short. Link in the video description. Alright, on to our first unpleasant topic of the week. Fallout 76, a horse that has been beaten to death, resurrected through necromancy, beaten to death again. So we're not going to spend a lot of time discussing this, but real quick, the devs had previously promised that there would never be any pay-to-win microtransactions, only cosmetic microtransactions. Well, this week, on the store, we see our first questionable microtransaction, something that is definitely not cosmetic only. You can now buy consumable repair kits. This is setting a dangerous precedent. This is the devs going back on their word, and people are understandably upset by this. On to some Borderlands 3 news. Now, Monday was April Fool's, and we got a great prank from the official Borderlands 3 Twitter account. A couple of tweets went up on April Fool's, stating that Borderlands 3 would release on September 13th, and it showed a few seconds of footage that had, at the end of it, an Epic Games Store logo and no Steam logo, and this is when they were showing what platforms the game would be available on. The tweets were quickly deleted. Everyone had a good laugh at this hilarious prank. But then on April 3rd, those same tweets reappeared with the same release date and the same platforms and the same Epic Games Store logo and the same absence of Steam. And it was later confirmed that Borderlands 3 will be an Epic Games Store exclusive for 6 months before coming to Steam. Now, many gamers were disappointed by this news. We've been discussing the Epic Games Store for weeks now, and to summarize why people are upset about it, basically Epic is buying out exclusive deals with games rather than trying to make their platform better and have the same features as Steam. And in response to the news that Borderlands 3 would be an Epic Games Store exclusive, some people went beyond being just disappointed and started trying to organize boycotts. Others went and review bombed Borderlands 1 and 2 on Steam. And look, review bombing old games doesn't accomplish anything. It's not going to stop people from buying Borderlands 3, and it's unfair to the people that worked on those previous games. It's also making a farce of Steam's review system. Review bombing doesn't offer helpful review scores to people that are interested in buying those old games, so you're actually making Steam worse in your anger against the Epic Games Store. And look, I understand this comes from a place of frustration. We feel we have no voice, and this is the only way that we can be heard. Well, speak with your wallet. As a consumer, how you spend your almighty dollar is your ultimate form of control. Decisions made in the name of money and not passion will only be swayed by consequences involving money and not passion. Alright, on to our huge topic of the week here. Anthem and Bioware. Reputable journalist Jason Schreier released an immense, absolutely massive article about what went wrong with the development of Anthem, based on interviews with 19 people who either worked on the game or adjacent to it. Schreier does excellent investigative journalism work. He has so many contacts within the industry and is able to gain the trust of so many insiders in order to publish articles like this. Even if you folks don't particularly care about Anthem anymore, it highlights perhaps deeper things going wrong with BioWare itself, a developer that has been much beloved throughout most of its life. Now, I'll drop a link to this colossal read in the video description, but I just want to go over some highlights. Schreier summarizes this as a story of a video game that was in development for nearly 7 years, but didn't enter production until the final 18 months, thanks to big narrative reboots, major design overhauls, and a leadership team said to be unable to provide a consistent vision and unwilling to listen to feedback. One BioWare developer allegedly said, "I don't know how accurate this is, but it felt like the entire game was basically built in the last 6 to 9 months. You couldn't play it. There was nothing there. It was just this crazy final rush. The hard part is, giggity, how do you make a decision when there's no game? There's nothing to play." Now, as a brief aside before we move into this next part, EA tends to get blamed for anything that goes wrong with the game. If a game published by EA is good, it's thanks to the developers. If it's bad, it's because of EA. Well, more and more I'm hearing stories, both publicly and spoken to me in confidence, that EA might not be as much of the boogeyman as we would like to believe. To clarify, they don't seem to meddle as much into the development of a game as we think. And that's one thing that you gather from this immense read. Nowhere does it seem that it is EA's fault that things went poorly with Anthem. So I wanted to clarify that before we move into this next anecdote involving EA executive Patrick Sutherland, the guy who BioWare's leadership actually reported to. An internal demo was created for Anthem around Christmas 2016, and a couple months later, Sutherland got to play it, and according to 3 people familiar with what happened, he apparently told BioWare that it was unacceptable. Quote, "This is not what you had promised to me as a game." One Anthem developer allegedly said that it was only after E3 2017 that it really felt like, okay, this is the game we're making. This is something that we see time and again. Games that are in development and plagued by a lack of vision, a failure to solidly settle on one concept and just kind of going back and forth between ideas. These games tend to release as messes. According to one person who worked on Anthem, quote, "Reading the reviews is like reading a laundry list of concerns that developers brought up with senior leadership." And apparently devs couldn't even bring up Destiny, which is arguably the most similar game out there to Anthem. The dev said, quote, "We need to be looking at games like Destiny because they're the market leaders. They're the guys who have been doing these things best. We should absolutely be looking at how they're doing things." But apparently leadership just kept refusing to discuss Destiny at meetings. They apparently wanted to make the comparisons to Diablo 3, but not to Destiny. And that's one thing that I even noticed with my limited experience with Anthem. It's that, how are some of these rookie mistakes being made? This is a genre that has existed. Why haven't the devs learned from things that have already been done? Well, if you don't want to acknowledge what's already been done, you can't learn from it. I understand the desire to not want to copy a competitor, but you have to understand your competition if you want to compete at all. One former BioWare dev allegedly said, "The root cause of all of this was the lack of vision. What are we making? Please tell us." The recurring theme was there was no vision, there was no clarity, there was no single director saying, "This is how it all works together." Even the flying mechanic, something that I think Anthem just nails, it's probably Anthem's best feature, is something that the team went back and forth on over the years, on whether they would cut it or include it. And through multiple iterations, there were versions of the game where it was cut, versions where it was brought back, and it's really only thanks to EA, is my understanding, that it was brought back. The team wanted to impress Sutherland, and they knew that, okay, flying is what's going to impress him. Now, another part of the story involves how it was developed by 2 different BioWare studios. The main one in Canada, and Studio B, if you will, in Austin. Now, Austin is the studio that produced Star Wars: The Old Republic. They're the studio that has experience building multiplayer games, whereas classic BioWare is more accustomed to doing single-player experiences. But allegedly, Studio A was basically just telling Studio B what to do without really listening to their feedback. One dev from BioWare Austin said, "One of the things we struggled with was we didn't understand the game concept. when Anthem was presented to us, it was never really clear what the game was. Even when Austin did manage to figure out what was going on, they tried to bring a lot of their knowledge and experience, a lot of the trial and error that they went through with Star Wars The Old Republic, but, quote, so we knew all these things, and we'd bring it up repeatedly, and we were ignored. They foresaw some of the problems that players would have with Anthem, and they tried to correct them, but leadership was having none of it. Now in this article, we also learned that Dragon Age 4 was basically cancelled and rebooted in order to save and finish Anthem. Lots of talent, including top talent, was moved off of the Dragon Age 4 team, put onto Anthem, and it's really that got that final push, that solid final idea together in just finishing up the game and getting it out the door. Now, there's also a lot of talk in this article about the stressful conditions and the mental health of the developers, and I don't want to focus too much on this just because I feel this is endemic of the video game industry as a whole and not just BioWare, but I will say that this is an important issue, one that I feel the industry needs to be more receptive towards solving. And I don't know if the only solution here is unionizing in order to ensure better working conditions for developers, because you hear about the crunch in AAA game development, and it's just insane. Now, the story doesn't end there. Minutes, literal minutes, after Jason Schreier's article went up, a rebuttal, if you will, or a response from BioWare went up on BioWare's website. Now, to clarify, Jason Schreier had previously sent BioWare a bullet point summary of what was in his article, because he did try to reach out to them for comment, but they refused to comment. But there is absolutely zero chance that they managed to read the 10,000 plus words that Jason Schreier wrote before posting their response. Quote, we'd like to take a moment to address an article published this morning about BioWare and Anthem's development. Then there's a whole bunch of fluff before ending with, we don't see the value in tearing down one another or one another's work. We don't believe articles that do that are making our industry and craft better. Look, everyone has dirty laundry. I get it. And it certainly sucks if your dirty laundry is the one singled out and made public. But to try to describe Schreier's article as an attack piece, which is effectively what they're doing by implying that this article is tearing down developers or producers and the game itself, is a complete mischaracterization, and is very unfair to Jason Schreier and his professionalism. Jason Schreier had this to say about their response, quote, the more I reread and think about this BioWare response, the more I'm amazed by how cowardly it is. Written before they even read the article, attacking a journalist for reporting the truth about a company in crisis. It's almost hard to believe. He later tweeted, on a related note, I'm told by a couple of BioWare employees that so far, studio management hasn't talked to staff about the article. Instead, the company sent out emails yesterday with one main message, don't talk to press. But later in the week, BioWare GM Casey Hudson sent a long email to the whole studio acknowledging the raised issues from the article and promising further discussion. Quote, the article mentions many of the problems in the development of Anthem and some of our previous projects, and it draws a link between those issues and the quality of our workplace and the well-being of our staff. These problems are real, and it's our top priority to continue working to solve them. So, if all that comes of this is that maybe BioWare starts to take the mental health of its employees more seriously, and not saying that they don't already, but if it helps them improve, then how can you say that, quote, we don't believe articles that do that are making our industry and craft better? Even if it's just shaming you into being better, is that not worth it? Alright, on to a quick action RPG roundup, starting with Path of Exile, new patch 3.6.3b released this week with Synthesis League improvements as well as various fixes. On to some Wolcen news. I've been playing a little bit of the new beta. It's pretty similar to the beta that I played back in, in December, I think I put up a video about it, the multiplayer beta. Since then, they've added new skills and new visuals and new monsters and new regions, but it'll be in the upcoming May update that they're going to bring Act 1 of the campaign into the beta. The devs also announced that they may introduce microtransactions in the future so that they can keep adding free expansions post-release. So, to clarify, the game will be a full-priced game and not cheap either, but they don't plan to charge for any additional expansions, which they would like to continue to release after launch, and they promise that there'll be no pay-to-win microtransactions. Also, we finally got a potential release date. It seems like they want to release the game before the end of the year. That's their objective. I suspect it's going to end up getting pushed back, but that's their current objective. On to some quick Grim Dawn news. GrimTools.com, a fantastic resource for the game, has now been fully updated to Forgotten Gods content, the latest expansion. Check out my impressions video of Grim Dawn if you haven't seen it. That went up yesterday. On to some quick Chaosbane news. We have a new trailer, the reveal of Alessa, the Wood Elf Waywatcher, one of the playable characters. She is a nature-based bow wielder that can summon dryads, and her abilities include things that can slow, block, and poison enemies. We'll be covering more Chaosbane in the future. On to some Torchlight Frontiers news. We have our first major update to the game since it's been up 24/7. Overall, this is update 4, and the major thing that it brings is a new game system called contracts. Quote, during each contract season, players can complete objectives to earn fame, which will unlock valuable rewards each time a fame level up is reached. Once a contract has ended, players will keep any rewards they've earned. New seasons bring a reset in fame level, new missions, and fresh loot to chase after. Without having played it yet, my initial impression is that this is a good system. It's another mechanic to engage with, it's another gameplay loop. And then lastly, in some Diablo 3 news, the PTR for Season 17 went up yesterday. Stay tuned for videos covering Diablo 3 builds and the PTR and what we'll see moving into the next season, because that is going to wrap up this week's video. But do be sure to have checked out last week's video in which we discussed the exciting game reveals that we saw during the week of PAX East. Thanks for watching. Special thanks to my Twitch, Patreon, and now YouTube supporters for making these videos possible. If you like what you see on this channel and want to support the creation of more content, you can consider supporting on Patreon or YouTube and unlocking behind the scenes content. If you enjoyed this video, please share it, check out these other videos, and subscribe to join Rhykker's Raiders for more gaming content.